Good morning. We'll get started shortly. Good morning. We'll get started in a minute. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. I'm Rochelle Isaac from the English Department and President of Faculty Council. Thank you for joining us and for submitting your questions. We'll be muting everyone to prevent background noise as usual. Please note that the town hall is being recorded and a link to the video will be circulated shortly. The bulk of the questions received this time around via the registration form focused on enrollment, course modality, and some aspect of our return to campus. You can submit additional questions in the chat and we will get to you as many of them as we can during our time together. I'd like to thank our sign language interpreters today for their assistance, and we want to address as many questions as we can, so we should get started. Good morning, President Adams. How are you? Thank you.
Good morning, Rochelle. I'm doing fine, and it's nice to see you. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Nice to see you too. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us today. And I know that this week we had a virtual visit with the Middle States Team Evaluation Chair, Dr. Generals. Would you like to take a moment to talk about the visit, your impressions?
Yes, I will. Before I jump into that, a more formal acknowledgement of you, Professor Isaac, and your role. Thank you. I think this is the third or fourth time you've volunteered to be the moderator of one of my town halls. And I think, well, I want to say again for the record that I'm grateful to you for that. It's fun to do this and important. And again, I appreciate you're a busy member of our English department faculty, so I appreciate you taking the time out to do this. And I also want to recognize Amy Rubinger and Susan Weinstein, who will be in the program later, both of whom are our American Sign Language interpreters for the event. Yes, you were right, Rochelle. On Wednesday, a couple of days ago, President Generals, Dr. Generals is, by the way, the president of the Philadelphia Community College, or the Community College of Philadelphia. I was going to say came to Queens, but he sort of did it like we're doing it today via Zoom. On that in a second. And he had a series of meetings, starting with me, kind of a meet and greet, if you will, at 7:30 in the morning, and then all through the morning, back-to-back Zooms with all of the many constituent groups behind our self-study supporting our reaccreditation through the Middle States Commission on Higher Education. So I think the day went well. I should say half day, sort of 5 hours, nonstop meetings. And many of you, hopefully some of you in the town hall today were part of the day. I imagine some of you out there were. Overall, I think we're in good shape. He raised a couple of points which we need to think about, acknowledge as we move forward in the next and preparing the final draft of the self-study. But again, I think overall he was really favorably impressed. And again, my sense is we got off to a very strong start. Remember our self-study draft, which we had sent to him in advance, checks in at 125 pages of tremendously thoughtful work by all the many volunteers that pull the information together in the subcommittees of all the 7 standards. And overall, I'd say here's some things that Dr. Generals wants us to think about as we move forward preparing the final draft. More evidence of our relationship with the broader Queens community, and what do people around Queens and constituent organizations, or organizations, could be schools, could be community groups that work with LaGuardia, what do they think of us, and how do we incorporate their views a little more assertively into the self-study? Evidence of our relationship with the community that we serve. Something else which was interesting, he's very interested, Dr. Jones is interested in how we have handled the pandemic. And, that surprised me a little bit, only just as a process point. Of course, anything he's interested in, we have to respond to, but that's because these are sort of 10-year exercises or 8-year exercises. And you take this sort of very long view about the degree to which we succeed on delivering on our mission and our assessment and our effectiveness in all these measures that the standards explore. So again, Middle States is a long view, and how we respond to COVID in the short term is more of a short term or short view issue. And so what he wants us to do is build more into the self-study, evidence of how we responded to the pandemic, its impact on teaching and learning at LaGuardia, its impact, across those standards. If you take the long view in Middle States, you don't always dig into the details of something that's happening here in the here and now. So we need to do some more work on that front. He's very interested in how LaGuardia responded or has responded to the social justice, the racial equity, racial equality movements, if you will, that really started, in the summer of the murder of George Floyd. And so more reflection on that and how it's led, how the college has responded and what have we done, in response to these social justice imperatives, these anti-racism imperatives, for example. So those are 3 or 4 areas where I think he believes our current draft is strong, but these are areas we could dig a little deeper into and build into the final draft. Now, I will say for folks involved in this, and that's many of you out there, I'm sure, we have to get to work because he wants to get that final draft by mid-December, let's say December, I think December 15th. And because he wants to be able to give it to the team, the evaluation team, so that they have plenty of time to read it and think about it and explore in advance of what will be a mid-March visit. And final point, Rochelle, something Dr. Generals and I discussed at some length, possibility of an in-person visit. He and I both would really like the Middle States visit in March. It's like March 20, 22nd, somewhere in there, to be in person and to not be on Zoom. And all of the Middle States accreditation, self-study and visits that have been going on for the last, 15 months have been on Zoom, as far as I know. So we want to break that mold and get the team here to LaGuardia for a face-to-face experience. And to do that, he needs to seek permission from the Middle States leadership at the home office of Middle States on the policy question. Can the team, these are all volunteers from other community colleges, do they allow in-person visits? And then we need to check with the community central office. Is it okay with them for us to do this? I believe it could work to our advantage for a whole host of reasons, but not the least of which is the timing. We will have started, we start the spring semester on March 5th. They would be arriving again around the 20th, I believe. We will have just started the semester. We have, as we know, 76% of our courses fully in person here on campus. So I think there's just going to be a great buzz of energy and activity, that start of the spring semester. And for them to feel that and to talk to students, especially, that's another thing they flag. They want to have more conversation with students. They want to see more student participation in the self-study, and all remote, all during COVID. That's been a challenge. So there are a lot of advantages, I think you all realize, to an in-person visit. For us, the human contact, getting to know the evaluators, them walking our halls, seeing our students, meeting our faculty and staff, it just goes a long way to bringing the self-study and its findings to life. It's a document, but it's about people and a place that's very special. And we need to showcase that to the team.
Okay, so let's turn to the budget. Is there a hiring freeze at LaGuardia? What about for adjuncts?
There is no longer, I guess, what we would call a hard hiring freeze, in that we can't, a rule that we can't hire anybody. What has happened is that the state, because of improving economic conditions in Albany, or in the state budget, the state suspended its hiring freeze. There was a hiring freeze in state agencies. And so that kind of comes down the Hudson River from Albany to New York and enables CUNY to no longer have an official hiring freeze. However, big however, colleges like LaGuardia that have serious operating deficits, and unfortunately, we have that. We have a very serious operating deficit this year, are not free to start hiring without getting approval from the central office, from CUNY HR. And so what we can do, Rochelle, are what Shahir Irfan, our VP for Administration and Finance, calls critical fills. So there are certain positions that if there's a vacancy because of retirement or a resignation, and it's a critical fill, we can make the case to the CUNY central office to fill that position. And an example here that's happening actually right now as we speak is we have a search for a new director of admissions, because Lavora retired over the summer. And so we said, director of admissions, that's about rebuilding our enrollment. It's a fundamental thing we've got to do. And we asked the CUNY central office if we could call that a critical fill, start the search. They approved it. Let me take a moment to say, this is a search we're trying to do quickly because we need someone. We want to work on spring enrollment. And the posting is on the CUNY website now. I mean, it went up last week. It's live. And we are receiving resumes from, across CUNY. I hope some internal candidates from LaGuardia may consider applying, and beyond, right? So, but please, if any of you can think of people who would be good to be our next director of admissions, encourage them to check out that posting and apply. So the answer is, Rochelle, again, is that in some limited cases, we can move forward to fill a critical vacancy. I'd also say, with respect to adjuncts, too early to say what our needs will be for all of our adjuncts for the spring semester. Registration started last week for spring. We're going to push to, as I've said before, start to rebuild our enrollment. Our target is 12,500 students, up from 12,000 where we are today. And we'll, the schedule has been set, but we have to wait to see how we do with enrollment, how we do with returning students. And here's a challenge. Normally mid-year, i.e. spring, you don't get a lot of freshmen. Freshmen typically start college in September. So we're going to make a big push, because I really believe there are lots of potential freshmen, people who finished a DOE high school in Queens, for example, back in June, and didn't come to LaGuardia this fall because they were frankly tired of online, because they had online high school instruction for at least three semesters in their high school experience. So we need to find those students. We need to find students who said no to LaGuardia because we had an online semester this fall, and they're looking for in-person, and tell them this great story that we're actually 76% in person. So we've got to make a big push and then we'll see how much we need, what the scheduling will do in terms of opportunities for our adjuncts.
Okay. We've had a new chief of staff. How are we funding that? Where did the money come from?
Yeah, very good question. We had two retirements of administrative personnel. Actually, one colleague retired from the foundation staff, and one in administration in records. And what I asked I got support from this from the chancellor's office. We took those two salary lines and combined them and actually saved money because the chief of staff doesn't make the total of those two salaries. But we used that existing funding, so there was no new expense in order for us to bring in Nayeli Valencia, who's my new chief of staff. So that's how we combine those two lines and in fact save money by doing that. And Nayeli is now on board.
Could you give us an update on the Tomorrow's campaign? Are we on track to raise 10 million by the end of the year?
Oh, Rochelle, you
Not my question.
This is a good one. I say, it's a great question because I think many of you will recall that the Tomorrow campaign, which is a campaign to raise $15 million to provide ACE scholarships, LaGuardia scholarships, and then what I call GAP grants and emergency through Rhonda Mouton and LaGuardia Cares emergency aid to students so they can come to LaGuardia and stay in school. That campaign was instigated or inspired by a very generous LaGuardia donor back in the spring who pledged $5 million if we could raise 10 by December 31st, which I just looked at the calendar, Rochelle, that's coming up.
Yes.
Now, I chuckle when you ask the question because it happens this afternoon. I'm going into Manhattan on that 7 train behind me here to have lunch with this anonymous donor and give her the update and answer this question. We have 5.5, until yesterday, we had 5.5 million. But yesterday I got a donor that I had been pursuing pledged $1 million. So that's the first time I'm saying this publicly. But we got $1 million gift from a donor yesterday. So that takes us to 6.5. We have almost $2 million in pending requests, right? Like proposals we put out to foundations that again would support our students, and we haven't heard back. But in most of those cases, they are supposed to give us, a yes or no, a thumbs up, a thumbs down before the end of the year. And we continue every day under the leadership of Karen Dubinsky, who's our director of donor engagement and the architect of this campaign. Karen's one of our longtime leading staff members of the foundation team. And Karen's leading this campaign. And so she and I had to talk about this yesterday. And look, it's going to be a push to get all this money in by December 31st, but we're still working on it. And we have a lot of support, and we have a lot of, as I say, pending proposals out there, and a fair number of people we still need to check in on, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
It's going well.
Good. How many students have received medical exemptions?
Medical exemptions, I believe, in this fall semester, 10. There's one, in case people are curious, religious exception, and I believe 10 medical exemptions. So, if you think about a college of 12,000 students, and of course, not all of them coming to campus, but increasingly thousands of them coming to campus, that's not a lot. I sort of want to make the point that that's, having 11 students that must, of course, go to the testing center, get a negative COVID test, every 7 days, show that along with their ID, et cetera, to public safety. You're talking about 11 students.
So there's a question here asking, how do we achieve social distancing in a classroom for unvaccinated students?
Well, this really relies on cooperation from the student, because of course, as a matter of privacy, even the faculty member is not allowed to know the name, of an unvaccinated student. And so our team through the health center creates a campus plan for each of those 11 students. That is to say, we sit with the student and look at the schedule and look at the classrooms that student needs to go in. And we make sure that each of the classrooms into which that student will go is large enough for the student to socially distance. The burden, or the requirement, I should say, the student is required to socially distance. We simply make sure that that's physically possible, right? That there is enough room, and how the student chooses to do that, but we want to make sure it's physically possible, and then the student needs to do that.
So what is the communication plan or process for informing students about vaccine requirements for on-campus courses or engaging with campus offices?
Well, as we did over the summer, leading right into September and the start of the fall semester, we are going to be relentless in texting, email, social media, phone calls, all manners of communication to students to tell them, all the ones that could be new to LaGuardia, new to CUNY, returning students who haven't come to campus in a couple semesters, potentially, to tell them all that they must be fully vaccinated. And we're starting that right away. Because of our March 5th, late start, if you will, in our 12/6 calendar, it gives us an advantage over some of the other colleges in CUNY because we have more time to drive home this message. I'll say it now, and you'll hear me repeat this, I think, Rochelle, frequently, but the magic day is February 23rd. And that's because February 23rd is 10 days prior to, if you get your calendars out, March 5th. And March 5th is the first day of Saturday classes for the spring semester. The CUNY policy for all semesters moving forward, students who have in-person classes, and that will be most of our LaGuardia students for the spring, must be fully vaccinated with their documentation uploaded and verified in CUNY First 10 days prior to the start of the semester. This rule from CUNY Central is actually very helpful because different colleges can have different start dates. So the simple rule is 10 days prior to the start of the semester, you got to be fully vaccinated. You got to have that green bar around your My LaGuardia app ID. And we are going to make that really clear to students, and again, through very aggressive communication.
If CUNY employees become mandated to provide proof of vaccine, will those interested still have the opportunity to be tested on campus?
I don't know the answer to that because this is a CUNY Central policy question that the chancellor and the trustees are wrestling with. And first is the question of an employer mandate. Will CUNY, as the employer of 42,000 people, right, all across the 25 colleges, will CUNY require all of its employees to be fully vaccinated to go into campus or office-like settings? And so that's the question they have to answer. If you look around, other state agencies, certainly city agencies have done that. Healthcare systems have done that. American Airlines have, other private sector employers have done that. But CUNY has not yet adopted that policy. If it does, your second part of your question has to be addressed. Will there be an option for negative COVID tests like there used to be for the students? And I don't know which way this is going to go. We'll see, and as soon as we know, I will do everything we can to communicate it to everybody and explain it.
So the masking policy presents an equity issue. So faculty can remove theirs, but students can't. I guess the question is that fair?
Well, the policy, it is true, just so folks understand, a member of the faculty has the option in a classroom of removing the mask in order to teach. Assuming, of course, the person's maintaining at least 6 feet of social distancing, and not going maskless up to look at a student's work and leaning over the shoulder of that student to look at some work on the desk without a mask on, obviously. But under the right conditions, a faculty member does have that option. And that's the CUNY policy. And frankly, I think it makes sense. Again, assuming the social distancing is maintained. As far as that being, and it makes sense because we want our faculty to be, now that they're back in classrooms with students, for them to have all the tools that they need to be as effective as possible in the classroom. And by the way, for students, we have a lot of students in LaGuardia for whom English is not their first language. And for them to understand a faculty member, it helps to see the person's face and speech. So lots of reasons why this is important. As a fairness issue, that doesn't really move me. I mean, fairness is not the issue. In the faculty-student relationship, Dr. Isaac, I imagine you give homework. Your students to you. you give assessments, quizzes, tests, you assign homework, you're a rigorous teacher and grader and a great member of the English department faculty. You have authority in the classroom. You have certain things that you need to do, and students, sorry, they have to do the homework because you tell them to. And so the fairness issue, it doesn't really wash with me in this case.
Okay. So, we have a question in the chat here. What will be the vaccination requirement moving forward for visitors who are not in CUNY First and want to enter our offices?
The visitors who want to come on campus need to show proof of their vaccination status. They're not in CUNY First, but they have to show something like the Excelsior Pass or some other proof of their vaccination status and an ID like a driver's license. And we're going to, moving forward, we're going to continue to enforce that policy.
Okay, so since COVID-19, we've learned so much about using technology to better assist our students and work efficiently as staff. Even though some students prefer in-person learning and assistance, there is an overwhelming number who want the virtual option to remain. Will student-facing offices be given the chance to keep a flexible work agreement long-term? It often feels like we're going backwards and ignoring all the great work we have done remotely. Why isn't CUNY allowing flexibility, especially considering we've seen so much innovation, not to mention better work-life balance for many?
Well, okay, this is interesting. And this is a big topic and something I think I can say with everybody in the audience that Rochelle, you and I, others have been discussing in our cabinet meetings here in E-Building on Monday mornings. I have not seen overwhelming evidence. The person who put the question out there used this word overwhelming evidence of the great success, of any success, of online instruction for the vast majority of our LaGuardia students. So if there is evidence that moving, because of the pandemic to about a 90 or 95% remote instruction model, if there's evidence that that has produced superior educational outcomes for most of our LaGuardia students, I really like to see that evidence. I'm skeptical of that claim. In fact, I see the opposite. My big concern is that learning outcomes are declining. We're losing students. Students are not performing as well in most cases. I'll say there is a role for online or for remote instruction, to be sure. I'll come back to that in a moment. But if you just take, for example, the biggest decline we've had in our enrollment this fall is in freshmen, first-time students. We're down something like 25%. And when you look at, there's a very important study done by a researcher, professor at the CUNY Graduate Center, that's a deep dive into the decline of community college student enrollment, like where are the students? And his research indicates, it's very, very clear that the students who were in New York City public schools, their junior and senior years, and it was online, number one, those that have tried to get into college feel inadequately prepared. That the end of their high school experience did not prepare them for college well. Many have decided not to go to college. And many of these, by the way, are African-American male students coming out of New York City high schools, Hispanic male students coming out of New York City high schools, disproportionately affected by the pandemic and deciding not to go to college, not a community college, not a four-year college, no college at all. That's terrible. It's a real problem. And I really believe much of the decision there is a student for whom online high school was not successful. They don't feel prepared. And now when they were given the option to go to CUNY, an online CUNY experience in fall of 22, they said, no, thank you. And maybe, by the way, it's economic as well, probably is, need to look for a job. So I may just have a different point of view from the person who put the question in the chat. I'd be happy to continue the discussion. But number one, I think we function best as a community college when we provide in-person, face-to-face instruction. Now, that's a longer discussion. There are a whole host of reasons for that. Finally, I will say that we might have had 5 or 6% of remote instruction before the pandemic, single digits. we have definitely, this part of the question is a part I agree with. We have learned so much, and we've had faculty and people in the Center for Teacher and Learning and training and resources and technology that people have definitely taken advantage of and sort of cracked the nut, solved the problem of successful online instruction for certain courses, for certain students, delivered by certain faculty who are really good at it. But we have got to say no to a chalk and talk lecture on a Zoom screen with all 20 of the screens turned off. That's not college. No one's learning. And if there's one thing we know we do well when we're in person, it's engaging students and engaging them in taking risks, in working in groups, in asking questions, in participate. If you don't think class participation matters for an effect in community college, then I guess you could do asynchronous, online for everybody. I think it matters. I think that's where critical thinking, social maturity, all kinds of communication skills, teamwork happens in a live in-person class setting with a great LaGuardia professor. So I'm all for that. I will say, Rochelle, that yes, just as we've done in business and technology, where we have 2 online degree programs, there is room for, I don't know what the number is. Is it 15, 20, 25%? There is room for online and remote instruction. It can be helpful for access reasons, and it can be helpful as effective instruction, good pedagogy. But we've got to be very clear on what that is and for whom it's effective. And frankly, in this area, we need some more data too.
What about student-facing offices? Because I think this is actually from a staff member, though.
The student-facing offices, I think that's going to be a case-by-case discussion with managers like we had for the fall. And I think, again, we'll see what the CUNY policy is. My own view is we should continue to be flexible and always ask the following question. But what is the most effective way to deliver the service to the student? So if in the wellness center, there's a type of counseling that is done more effectively online, we should be open to that. If there's a type of advising with our professional advisors who can advise a student from home, they're working from home and they're doing it, we should be open to that. But the question, where the person works, that question is subordinate to a much more important question. What is the most effective way to serve our students? And if it is more effective to do it remotely, let's do it remotely. But if it's more effective to do in person, we're going to do it in person. This is not about something that was the end of that question, which was, quality of life, or, I think the personal, well, it's more convenient for me to work from home. Sorry, that's not compelling to me. What is the most effective way to serve our students? That always trumps matters of personal convenience, or I don't want to commute, or I don't want to pay for parking. You did it before, you may need to do it again.
Can CUNY make sure students have to submit their vaccination records before they register for their spring classes and not after, in the hopes of avoiding chaos for the spring semester when the majority of classes will be in person?
Well, that's again what I said before, we're pushing students to do this now, So in the registration process with new students and returning students, telling them, hey, you're going to have your classes on campus. So you've got to get fully vaccinated if you're not vaccinated yet. And so we have, let's say, half of November, whatever's left of November, December, January, February, every week, same thing, pushing students to get vaccinated. If they're not, upload that and understand the requirement. I will say, by the way, this relates to the issuance of WA grades in the current semester. I got a report from our registrar, Burhan Siddiqui, yesterday. Very good news in that, we had almost 1,500 students at the start of this campaign who had in-person classes, a section of a hybrid or fully, in most cases, it was a section of a hybrid on campus, and they were not vaccinated. We issued WA grades to a good number of them. I think something like in the end 700. We keep chipping away at it, and I think we're down to under 400 students because we go in and when they realize we're serious, they get the vaccination. Got to wait 14 days for it to be fully effective, and then the CUNY First system recognizes their status and they come to campus, and we reverse the WA grade in CUNY First. It comes off their transcript. So every week more and more students are doing that. And we're seeing a gradual reduction in the number of students with WA grades because they don't have a COVID vaccine. And PS, there were a couple hundred students who, and this always happens, had WAs because they didn't have MMR, which is the vaccination for mumps, rubella, mumps and rubella. And so those are gradually being reversed as well. So we're making headway there, but to your point, Rochelle, relentless communication, informing students of this, and then helping them with the technology, uploading it so they're ready to go on the 23rd, technically, of February. They're all ready to go for 10 days later, the start of the semester.
So how much flexibility in choosing course modality do program directors really have?
Well, not a lot, because it's the domain of the chair. I suspect you know in your department. And so that's a relationship between program directors and the chair. The chair has the authority. Chairs oversee the schedule in the end.
Mm-hmm. Can we offer modality flexibility alternatives now to prepare for a post-COVID educational world?
That's good. Yeah, that's interesting. That gets back to the earlier question. And again, I want to recognize, I think by now you all know how I feel about the value of in-person, face-to-face instruction. But again, for the record, yeah, we've got to do a plan, Rochelle, for post-COVID. What do we offer at LaGuardia that's remote? Which courses, which degrees, which departments, which faculty, and which students are eligible? Remember, before we went to being fully remote because of COVID, there was a whole policy. This is, around where students needed to be to take an online course. Freshmen couldn't take online courses prior to COVID. And, we had to throw those restrictions out the window because we had no choice. But there's the question of, at what point in your LaGuardia career, is it a situation with number of credits accumulated or GPA or something else? Are we confident that you will benefit? In fact, not just benefit, you will do better in that online course than you would if it were in person. Or I suppose I should be fair and say equally well, because you may have a reason for something like childcare, transportation, work, scheduling, that the online option is your access. But I want to be sure, we've got to be sure you get an equal, if not better, educational outcome from that. And so we've got to design this. And remember, COVID forced us just to do it all in a hurry and figure it out as we were kind of moving along. And again, LaGuardia faculty all across CUNY did an amazing job at figuring it out for those that had not done this before and making it work as best as we could. So I welcome this discussion, and that's something our provost Paul Arcari and I talk about a lot. And we need to talk to chairs and program directors and faculty and really design the future, the online or the remote instructional future of LaGuardia Community College, and let students know we're going to do that.
Someone in the chat just putting, and they're from Student Advising Services, they're suggesting that the majority of students I meet with ask if more online classes will be added for the spring. Will they? They have come to appreciate the flexibility it allows them. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, no, the schedule is set. So the short answer is no. And to that advisor, and I would remind that advisor of something that the advisor, I'm sure, knows far better than I do, because they had this everyday experience with students. Let's just say I've come across a few students who, if you gave them the choice, they take online because it's easy, because they view it as easier. They turn off their Zoom screen, they multitask, and that's not college. So there are no doubt some students who definitely, for personal, logistical, health, transportation, childcare issues, this is more than a convenience, it's a necessity, right, for them to stay in college. I got that, and we need to continue to support those students. But I am skeptical of many students who say, oh, please, I want to continue online. And because I don't believe that those students are always the best judges of how their own educational process works. It's a little bit like, Rochelle, would you let your students, do you let them determine the assessments themselves, or do you design an assessment? I mean, I know this can be debated, but my point is we know something, we should, right? We are experts in education, teaching, learning, pedagogy. And by definition, we don't expect our students to know all that. We want to use what we know to help them learn. When students say, I think I'm really doing well in my online class, show me the data and compare it to what? And let's be careful we don't fall into a trap of being so accommodating to students because we want to be accommodating to them that we lower the bar in terms of our expectations for their academic success. You know, this is a rigorous college education. We don't let a pandemic water that down. I really want a LaGuardia, you know, we're going to give away 3,000 LaGuardia degrees, June 21st, Queens College campus. We're planning graduation now. Each one of those credentials has to have value as a transfer credential or value in the labor market. We cannot water that down. It has to be meaningful. And we just owe it to our students to make sure we're always doing that. So I take with a note of caution the students that tell me, oh, President Adams, can we continue? I really want to have my online college experience. By the way, they can get that at Coursera for free. They can go all over the place. Once you commoditize community college education through online platforms, if that's all you're all going to do, what's the argument for LaGuardia? You know, what's the business, if you will, what's the business proposition if we're doing something everybody else is doing at the same price, and it's regardless of location?
So here's an interesting question. What is the college administration doing to reverse the enrollment decline in the short term and then in the long term?
Yeah, okay. Talk about something we are obsessed with here at LaGuardia. Several things, and if I've said them before, I apologize, but some of this is not rocket science. And so it's about, you know, what works and repeating it. And so here I'm going to, you know, bear with me as I repeat some things. We have to have stronger partnerships with Queens high schools, Queens community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, and what I call kind of intermediaries, people in the community who tell the LaGuardia story to potential students, right? And build much stronger pipelines from all of those organizations. One of the things Nayeli Valencia is going to do, because she has a long track record working with Queens CBOs, she's my new chief of staff, is build a database of community partners all across Queens and beyond. Typical, you know, unfortunately at LaGuardia, this kind of stuff tends to be siloed and spread around the college. We got to pull it all together and have a communication strategy to get out to those organizations and have them work as recruitment partners. Number two, again, I've said this before, adult and continuing education. You know, we will have close to 12,000 people involved in ACE this year, which is the same number of degree-seeking students in the college. And those are in three sort of levels of engagement with ACE, adult and continuing ed. All of the pre-college programs, GED, and by the way, Sunil Gupta, our VP there, just told me yesterday that we no longer have the task for everyone who had to figure out over the years the TASC, the test, assessment, second complete, the new GED. The New York State Department of Education just abolished that and said we can go back to the GED. Fine. I never stopped calling it the GED. So GED in Spanish, GED in English, CLIP, ESL, the TEL. That's a lot of what we do. Adult education, basic education, get ready for college. Now, right now, in the current semester, 150 of our current students came over the summer from those pre-college programs. And that's about 7% of our incoming 2,000 or so freshmen. So we got to move the needle on that. 7% is not enough. It should be 10, it should be 15. I'm saying this publicly for the first time. Sunil Gupta is paying attention. John, paying attention. We've got to make that pipeline, pre-college programs, our dual enrollment programs with our 3 partner high schools here in Long Island City. We've got to create more of those. Those are working all over the country. Big driver of enrollment or dual enrollment programs. So in ACE, you've got that set. Then you've got several thousand people in our workforce training programs getting credentials to get back into the economy and support their families. But they're all potential LaGuardia students, maybe at night, maybe on weekends, as they settle into their new careers in healthcare, technology, and other fields. And finally, and this we need to spend more time on, Rochelle, we probably this year will have close to 3,500 individuals who are served by our small business assistance programs under the leadership of Asanta Howard and her team. And that's not just everyone knows the Goldman Sachs program, Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses. That's our PTAC. Which is a federally funded program from MWBE firms to get access to big government contracts and build their businesses. I mean, we've got the SBDC, Small Business Development Center, 6 programs over there, serving 3,500 people in a pandemic. It's fantastic. How do we get more of those that are interested into the college programs, the degree programs? So that's the second thing we've got to do. We're gonna, maybe this is the first, I got them out of order. When I turned to Robert Jaffe, Gina Taraskevich, the communications team, they're doing this already, but we are gonna double down on our advertising recruitment outreach in all platforms, lots of social media, obviously. We've been doing search ads on Google and other search engines, and it's very effective because it's very targeted and you get the sort of data on it, the performance data right away, and you can tweak the messaging. So we are going to do that, and we're doing that now, but we're going to do very aggressive advertising, and we're going to tell this story. We're going to tell the story that for spring semester, LaGuardia Community College is community college the way you want it to be for most students. It's the college that is what you envision college being, again, for most of our students, i.e. in person on this campus. Under the direction of Interim Associate Dean Dr. Faye Butler, we're bringing back athletics. We presented that at Senate the other day, or Dr. Butler did. Went well, the discussion, good concerns raised. We're going to manage that. But we're good. We want to make LaGuardia, and we're going to communicate this, right? We're going to tell the story that LaGuardia is college the way you thought it ought to be. Doesn't mean it's college the way it used to be, but it's the college that you're looking for. And getting that message to students who want to have that college experience here on campus in Long Island City. So very aggressive advertising. People complain to me, say, oh, President Adams, how come BMCC has those bus ads? And they even advertise on garbage cans where I live in Brooklyn. I don't like advertising on garbage cans. I don't like it. But I got to give them credit. They have a huge budget for advertising, and they do traditional advertising, print, what's called out of home, like bus ads, subways. We have not at LaGuardia had a budget for that. And because of our deficit, we don't have a budget for that. So we use our resources in a very cost-effective way. And I guess what I'm going to say is many of us in the LaGuardia community don't see it because it's social media and it's targeted to the students we're trying to attract. It's not big public billboards that people all across the community would see. So trust me when I say we're doing a lot of this, but because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not happening. It means it's strategically targeted to the student groups that our admission team is trying to enroll.
So here's an interesting view about enrollment. Why is expansion, more faculty, more students, always the goal of LaGuardia? Can we decide not to expand for a while and instead of increasing the quantities, work on improving the quality of services that we provide, teaching, learning? Isn't the recent decline of student enrollment in community colleges a sign that students don't see enough value in a degree?
Oh, I love this question. How much time do we have, Rochelle? We have about an hour and a half to go. So this is a really big issue. I mean, and I will say to whoever wrote the question, thank you. I have begun to raise this with the chancellor and the team over at the central office. And maybe it's because I sometimes play I guess this is getting tired too, but I play oh, I'm just new here card. I'm the new president card. It's something I just don't understand. How does these enrollment targets get created in the first place? Why does the central office tell us we have to have 16,000 students or whatever? And so it's the system we live in, Rochelle, is one that is very much expense budget driven, is what it is. So it costs this year about $135 million to run LaGuardia. That's 2,000 employees, 1.8 million square feet of space, all the expenses that come with running a college. And so we have we're starting with this challenge, which is how do we have enough enrollment to produce the revenue to cover the expenses? And by the way, we don't, and we had a big cut, $18 million. Thank you, Mayor de Blasio, in our city funding this year. Again, I've said this before, thank you, on the other hand, President Biden and Congress, because we have federal stimulus funds to help us this year. We won't next year, by most likelihood. But anyway, the enrollment number gets kind of budget driven. And that's not necessarily the right way to do it. In a perfect world, you'd say, what is the optimal size of LaGuardia Community College? Where do we produce the best outcomes for our students? What's the optimal class size? It probably isn't 30 something students. I mean, I think you and I, Rochelle.
Definitely not 30 something.
No. So I'll take it a step further. We have a 32% graduation rate. Who thinks that's good? Well, how is that acceptable? That's like saying 2/3 of the students, first gen, students of color, low income, predominantly from Queens, predominantly women. We take their money in the form of Pell and TAP, their federal and state financial aid. We take their money, we all get paid, and we come to work every day knowing 2/3 of them won't make it to graduation. That's it. That's for me, that's a moral issue, right? So I get back to optimization. Sorry to use sort of a technical term here, a business term. What's the optimal size of LaGuardia so that we can do a better job at producing an outcome for a higher percentage of those students? How do we move the needle from 32% to 35 and 38 and 40, and how far can we go? And what's the optimal size to produce that better result? I don't sleep well thinking about the 2/3 of our students. We take their money, they end up on the street. By the way, often with debt. And I think most people know there's no such thing as a refund on your financial aid. And you got a lifetime limit, and you got 36 TAP points in New York State. So you use them, you lose them. And if you lose them at LaGuardia and you go out on the street, you can't go to some other community school and start all over. So we got to be real about this. And in that case, I say, on this enrollment question, what's the optimal size of this college for the market that we serve, right? The students out there, for the market in which we compete, because we do not do this alone, right? In Queens alone, there's QCC, there's PMCC, there's obviously 7 community colleges in the system. We're not the only ones. They're the private schools, the proprietary schools, who have a lot of the vocational or CTE-like programs that we have. So we don't function alone, and there is a limited number of students out there. What's the optimal size? This is actually the discussion I want to have. I get tired of, we must go get 16,000 students to satisfy, so we don't have a deficit.
Okay.
I'm stuck because on 42nd Street, they just want Shahir and me to come up with the money, cover the expenses.
So we have some great questions. So I want to cover this one. Since 1977, LaGuardia has been acknowledged for its numerous art installations around the campus. With just a short walk through our halls, a person recognizes the scope of this undertaking. Shortly after the pandemic began, the college released the gallery director who was organizing the exhibition scheduled for the college. Does the administration have any plans to continue support for the program?
Okay, sometimes you ask me questions, Rochelle, that I've thought about because it's sort of in my day-to-day. And then you ask me a question like this one, which is like, this is new to me. So I didn't realize there was someone at the college that must have happened before I arrived, where there was an art director who was let go. So that number one, we need to look into that because, it's important to have the personnel to support this. What is evident to me, I think, I've been coming to this building every day since June, stopped working from home. There's art all over this campus, and it's amazing. I mean, I take the stairs in E building and I see the sculpture every day and I marvel at it. And I see the paintings on the walls, and then special, we have the Martin Luther King exhibit. We have some history of New York City. We have the industrial past of Long Island City stuff. We have the archive, the Richard Lehman team, the LaGuardia Wagner archive. So, and of course, we have fine arts programs and amazing talented faculty and students in fine arts, painting, sculpture, photography, and the like. And so it's very important to me. I, did a little talk on the importance of humanities, education in a community college setting in my fall report. So I feel very strongly about the arts at LaGuardia, and I see the evidence of the talent and the beauty, right, all over the campus. So but the question catches me off guard because I don't know what we need. We'll figure it out. I guess I'm fully committed to this, staffing wise and exhibits. And, I think I'm going to want to work with Wendy Nicholson on this too. Wendy, as I think most of you know, is our executive director of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And she's been doing a lot around trying to coordinate heritage and cultural celebrations, like with her Did You Know monthly emails of special events. But it strikes me that there is an opportunity to advance our goals for building a really supportive, inclusive, and welcoming campus or our community, to do that through art and through like visually what you see and what you hear on our walls and in our facilities. So it's a huge opportunity. I'm saying this, I haven't mentioned this to her, but you're making me think. So I have to go talk to Wendy. She sits next to me. I'll talk to her about this later. It's very important. If I think a college, this sounds like a bumper sticker, but I really believe it. What's so important in what we do in higher education is we often call it a search for truth. Most things come down to a search for truth, but I always add, and a search for beauty. And a search for beauty has to be part of a liberal arts education and a community college education. And what better way than through music and art? There's much ink has been spilled over the importance of imagining, dreaming, imagination. And there's actually, David Brooks has a column in today's Times that's worth reading about the power of imagination. And we have an obligation to empower imaginative thinking, creative thinking, and to ensure that our students imagine and dream.
Oh, wow. Okay, so now the college is taking its time in appointing or hiring a chief diversity officer. So faculty are hesitant to report bullying to HR. When will that search take place? Any updates on that? And how do you view your relationship between HR, legal, and the chief diversity officer?
Yeah, a couple of things. We have submitted for posting the job vacancy notification. It's called the JV, and basically the job description to the CUNY central office, because we can't post a position. They post it for us in the CUNY system, and then they broadcast it, in this case, all around the country. So I know Ron Edwards, our executive director of HR, has submitted the materials to CUNY. And so this posting should be up, if not today, next week. So it means the search then enters its public phase, where we look for candidates far and wide. So that's actively happening. I will say, again, I asked Wendy Nicholson, our executive director of DEI, to chair the search. Mm-hmm. Ron Edwards, and she's done that, and she has a committee form. Ron Edwards, our director of HR, is also our current interim chief diversity officer and Title IX administrator. So to the person who wrote the question, just want to remind he, she, they that any issue related to any kind of allegation or the potential for any kind of discrimination or inappropriate sexual activity, sexual behavior should still go to Ron. He plays two roles. He's the head of HR, and he will do investigations. When he used to work at LIU, he was the CDO at LIU. So he knows this work very well. I don't like him having two jobs because it's too much for one person. So we need to bring in somebody permanent. But again, please know that if you have any reason for an investigation or want to make a complaint or just want to talk to Ron about a potential problem, he's there in that role. When you see him in that role, it's like he changes hats, and now he's the interim CDO and Title IX administrator.
Two more questions about hiring. One is, will you pledge that the hiring that will take place be transparent without the influence of the people who already occupy the interim positions, and that they will not be the ones putting the search committee together? And two, why is it necessary to hire another admissions director when there's one already? Is Shannon Lund as the director in the admissions office?
Okay. Allow me to go back and just one more thing, because it's so important about the chief diversity officer. I want to make sure everybody knows the very, very good news that Maria Cook, our general counsel, our legal counsel, is back at LaGuardia following being out on leave for a good part of this year. And so it's great to have her back. Maria, again, as someone who oversees our compliance and legal affairs, also will work closely with Wendy, with Ron, with me, and the new chief diversity officer to be determined, right, to be hired. But just wanted to flag for everybody that Wendy's back, which is really fantastic. Rochelle, the main part of your question, in admissions, and Shannon Lund is actually, I'm a little confused because Shannon is not the director of admissions. Shannon has been running a group that's related to student recruitment and enrollment. And there've been some changes in the name of the group, and some additional people are now reporting to Shannon. But no, Shannon has a different job. Shannon's always been on the front lines, more on the recruitment side, and admissions is more of the processing of applications and getting students who apply to us to accept the offer and enroll in LaGuardia. So anyway, the point is Lavora's job is vacant because she retired, and that's why that was posted. We are filling that vacancy. Shannon's job is different. Director of admissions is a vacancy created by Lavora's retirement and a critical position to fill. And then there's, of course, I mean, we will conduct searches when we can. These have not yet been approved by CUNY Central to complete the reorganization of student affairs. And colleagues will remember that back in the spring, for a variety of reasons, I split that division in two. We created a division of enrollment management. That's all the enrollment, recruitment and enrollment and registration and financial aid and LaGuardia Cares, all those enrollment functions. And then we've been calling it student success. I prefer to call it student life because as far as I'm concerned, everyone in this college is responsible for student success, everybody. Student life has all the student support services and functions around student life, right? And that is, again, being run right now by Interim Associate Dean Dr. Faye Butler. Enrollment management, as I think folks know, Interim Associate Dean Dr. Gail Bax-Jarrett. So what I'm trying to do is get the CUNY Central Office to approve the posting and then the searches for permanent VPs for each area. So we would have a VP of enrollment management and a VP of and when that happens, I hope it happens, we will commence searches and people within the LaGuardia community can apply. People from outside, of course, these will be big, high-profile searches. We'll look far and wide for the best possible talent. As the part of the question that says, can we make sure that people who work at LaGuardia now don't have any kind of undue influence in the search process? The good news is yes, because that's how the CUNY search process works. There are controls in place around the formation of a committee, the role of a hiring manager, the role of the committee chair. This is all documented in HR policies, and it ensures a fair process for all. So I'm confident we'll be able to do that. What I'm really most concerned about is I want a green light from the CUNY Central Office so we can start that process. I'd really like to get these searches going.
So, okay, this is about the classroom. Do all our classrooms and offices have carbon dioxide and or air quality ventilation monitors? The New York Times did a story on this subject. They actually gave us a link, and the title is "The Hot New Back to School Accessory and Air Quality Monitor."
We have 405 classrooms in our 4 buildings, including the leased space in B building. And we have 225 rooms currently in use, because we're not fully loaded with all students, faculty, and staff yet. And as I indicated in an email, my weekly return to campus update yesterday, at the request of 3 faculty members who did have complaints about air quality, but lighting and a couple of other glitches in their classrooms, VP Shahir Irfan and the facilities maintenance team, VP Irfan deployed the team to do a top-to-bottom inspection of the 225 classrooms in all 4 buildings that we're using right now to check for any kind of problems, and with a pledge that they would be addressed and resolved by close of business today, Friday. So thank you for the faculty who reported those issues, and I'm confident Shahir and the team have addressed them or will have them resolved by the end of the day today. Air quality, air quality monitoring in CUNY is done. We've used an outside contractor, an engineering firm that was hired by the CUNY Central Office as part of our reopening plan to do all the testing on air quality. We did turn out Like we identified filters that needed to be replaced. We put MERV 13, the highest level filter, in there. We've been very careful around the air intakes, the maintenance of the air, the sort of circulating equipment. So for example, if you have a typical classroom in which you teach, Rochelle, when your class ends, that room for the next hour has the entire air exchanged, right? So there's a pace with which on a per cubic air handling systems take out the dirty air and pump in fresh air. And so our systems are set up to constantly be removing air and putting in new air, removing air and filtering it, right? The air in the buildings at LaGuardia, this is not, I don't have the scientific term for this, but I've been assured it when I've asked about it. The air quality in our classrooms is better than the air quality that you see behind me, where the 7th grade is outside on the city streets. You know, remember the city of New York we live in, which, by the way, air pollution is a lot less than when I was growing up, and it was, you know, pretty dirty sky every day. But here in our buildings, the air, we do not have a carbon dioxide monitor, which I think the questioner was asking. And I didn't see the New York Times article, but I can look into that. But carbon dioxide has not been the threat that we've been concerned about. In part, we don't have, in fact, you know, the thing we've been concerned about is the cleanliness of the air and the circulation of the air. You know, we are close to a cement plant, as you all know, behind us on 47th Avenue, that produces particulate matter. That's a concern. We want to have that be filtered out. No one should be breathing cement dust. I mean, it's not that bad a problem, but you have to be mindful of it. So again, we follow the CUNY Central guidelines. We use their engineering firm. We do the testing around air quality that we're mandated to do. Workplaces are subject to OSHA regulation, and in some cases, that's the Occupational Safe and Healthy Administration in Washington, but also New York State has DEC, New York City has DEP, and there are a host of regulatory bodies that monitor everything from, you know, our water that we drink in LaGuardia, air, and you know, risks against particulates or contaminants. So I'm confident that we have 50-year-old buildings. You know, we have to be careful. We have old infrastructure, but we are doing everything we're supposed to do to maintain a safe environment and follow the regulation, be fully compliant with government, you know, imposed health and safety regulations. The story in the New York Times, the carbon monoxide, or I'm sorry, I think you said carbon dioxide. That I'll have to look into, but something we've been focused on.
So somebody's wondering about our reasoning for having employees not enter the college via the Van Dam entrance. They're saying, I understand there's a separate entrance and exit on Thompson, but for those of us that work in the E building, it's a large inconvenience. If we have proper ID verification, why can't security check us out there?
You know, it's a fair question. I mean, I walked down the other day to the Van Dam Diner to get a salad, and I, you know, look at that entrance, you know, I'm waiting for my salad, thinking, how come we're not using it? The truth is we are using that entrance for very specific groups. Our high school students come in that are across the street, for example, at Middle College High School, they cross Van Dam. So you'll notice high school students use that, certain contractors use Van Dam. And I believe when we were doing more of the testing, you know, for students, now students, except for the 11 that we talked about earlier, we wanted that to be a separate entrance for people coming in for testing, basically to separate the vaccinated from the unvaccinated. So Van Dam was set up to be used for very specific groups of people, and that would make the entrance on Thompson exclusive for people who are vaccinated and are, you know, can come in that way. So I do apologize for the inconvenience for people who have to do a longer walk to come around, but I will remind you, it helps you get closer to your goal of 10,000 steps. That's easy to do around here in our long hallways. And I will also say that I believe in the new year, as we get more and more people on campus, we will be able to reopen that entrance on Van Dam for everybody. But there's just not enough demand now to have it work like from a, you know, we have to deploy public safety officers and set up all the screening and everything, there's not enough demand, not enough people on campus now to justify that. But as soon as we have bigger crowds, it will become necessary. So I'm hopeful that in the new year, for sure, the Van Damme will be reopened for everybody.
So it's 11:10, so maybe we'll just do one more question. It's coming back to campus. In coming back to campus, many of us are noting that our work computers are slow, in some cases significantly slower than our personal home computers. Fixes include new RAM, updated processing system, and other hardware needs that costs money. Will there be an update? Will there be an effort to update technology so faculty and staff can do their jobs more efficiently?
We should, we should definitely do that. I want to just, I need to pull something out of my desk here. It's a little bit of a cheat, which is a telephone number. Because I don't have this memorized, I have to pause and look it up, Rochelle.
Okay.
But I want to say this: if anyone out there has any IT related issues, that computer that's not working well, any kind of connectivity, any kind of other needs, tech support. This is in yesterday's return to campus memo. I recalled that I put this in there, so I just wanted to check the number. It's 6127 or 718-482-6127. But that's kind of the tech support hotline, dial 6127 and explain what the issue is. And VP Henry Saltiel and his team will address it. On a more proactive note, let me say that I'll raise, I appreciate the question, thank you. And I'll raise it with VP Saltiel today or Monday to see if there isn't a way to, to make sure we do an assessment and make sure everyone has the technology and the tools they need as they return to campus. Maybe some kind of survey, or not that, we have a blank check in terms of resources to buy new equipment, but where we have equipment, where we can make upgrades, where we can do it, we want to make sure everybody has the appropriate tools when they return to campus.
Oh, somebody's saying that there were people who couldn't log onto the town hall. I want to apologize for that. I have no idea what happened. Gina, just letting you know. So President Adams, that was our last question for today. Do you want to make any other announcements before we end?
Well, no, nothing in particular. I just really want to thank you again, Rochelle, and Amy and Susan, our American Sign Language interpreters. And I'm cheating too, again, I'm looking at the part of the Zoom screen that says participants 235. So 235 people plus, unfortunately, whoever didn't get in, didn't get in. But anyway, great turnout on this, I guess, rainy Friday morning here in Long Island. I wish I could say good to see you all, but I can't see anybody but Rochelle and Susan right now. And so one thing, I hope to do a closing sessions, at the end of the semester event in person, probably in the little theater here on campus, and we'll simulcast it, we'll stream it, it'll be live and live streamed. And so we're going to work on that. And that's a way of saying to everybody, welcome back to campus. Look forward to seeing you. There's already a lot of people here. Big shout out to Tom Dempsey and the music faculty that did the live faculty showcase. Let me say that again, live. It was last Thursday night, here on campus. It's on YouTube and on Facebook. You can see the faculty music performance. But we have live music back on campus, just like it's great to have painting, art, sculpture, and photography on campus. By the way, the archives has just helped post an amazing exhibit of photography, which you can access on our website. Check it out, and by going to LaGuardia Archives. A lot of great stuff going on. I'm trying to emphasize this. A lot of stuff going on here on campus, right? As we work to welcome all of you back in the spring, in the coming weeks and in the run up to the spring semester. If I can say this, Rochelle, just to close out, Rochelle and I never get to every question, and it's hard. So if you still have a question, just send it to me directly, and I'll just write you an email and try to answer it as best I can. If I don't see some of you in the next couple of weeks, if you're not here on campus, let me just take a moment to wish you a happy Thanksgiving with your families, and I hope everyone has a nice Thanksgiving break. And then we'll keep doing what we're doing for our students right through the end of the semester and into the holidays. Thank you, Rochelle. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Have a good weekend. Bye.
Bye, everybody.